Taiyo is a pathetic orphan who somehow became friends with the most popular girl from a powerful assassin family. But everything changes when he finds out her life is at risk, so he decides to marry her to take down her enemies before they can enjoy a wild honeymoon. A few days after Taiyo lost his whole family in a terrible car crash, he finds himself looking at their photos during the funeral. It hits him how quickly you can lose what you love, and he instinctively pulls his hand away from his childhood friend, Matsumi. But she holds on to his hand again and promises to be there for him, no matter what, causing him to finally let out the tears he has been holding back. Weeks later at school, Matsumi comes to bring him lunch, and when she questions why he keeps pushing everyone away, he snaps at her to save her caring mother routine for when she becomes the baby mama of some street thug. Even though he clearly tried to intimidate her, she forces him to take her food, so he thanks her and then asks why she rejected the captain of the soccer team. Just then, the vice principal arrives to grab a bite and OS best about how much he loves Matsumi's cooking. When she questions how he returned from his lecture trip so quickly, Kyoichiro insists he did it just to be near her and tells Taiyo to visit him after class before he leaves. Hours later, Taiyo finds himself in Kyoichiro's office, puzzled as to why the wannabe secret agent is sitting so close when there's a perfectly good chair available. Suddenly, Kyoichiro shows him a whole collection of Matsumi's photos, but the real surprise comes when he plays a video where he nearly sent the soccer team captain to his grave. Just as Taiyo thinks about calling for help, Kyoichiro holds a knife against his neck and confesses he can't handle Matsumi's relationship. Out of nowhere, a girl wrapped in toilet paper leaps through the window, and Taiyo quickly hits the snooze button, only to wake up surrounded by Matsumi and a group of weirdos who look like they escaped from Frankenstein's lab. After jumping off the couch and demanding to know what's happening, Matsumi explains that they are all her siblings and adds that everyone in their family is a super spy. As Kengo tries to explain Kyoichiro's reputation as the top assassin in the country, the alarm system goes off, signaling his return. Futaba quickly tells Taiyo that he must marry Matsumi as it's the only way to keep Kyoichiro from killing him. When Matsumi protests, saying they can't just impose a family on him after he lost his own, they all agree to confront Kyoichiro while she and Kengo take Taiyo deeper into the house to hide. But just a few minutes later, Kyoichiro catches up and tells Matsumi to stop trying to shield him. After she and the dog attempt to fight back, he uses his iron webs to trap them and reveals Kengo's disguise, which was meant to make him look like Matsumi. He then insists that Matsumi drop her disguise as Taiyo and accept that he is the only one who can protect her. Just when she seems ready to accept his twisted obsession, Taiyo emerges from the painting, declaring he is prepared to marry her. Realizing he is serious, she unlocks the second half of her ring and throws it to him. But Kyoichiro activates his steel webs again to stop Taiyo. Nevertheless, Taiyo manages to slip through and grabs the ring, officially becoming Matsumi's husband, just as the others arrive to congratulate him on joining the family. The next morning at his place, Kyoichiro also welcomes him into the family with another murder attempt, followed by a torturous dance session using his iron webs. Luckily, Matsumi arrives just in time to intervene, but then Kyoichiro suddenly grabs both of them and leaps out the window to escape a deadly bomb that obliterates the entire house. When Taiyo asks if that was his way of saying good morning, Kyoichiro reveals that it was actually an attempt on Matsumi's life before ushering them into a limo. He then informs Taiyo that her life will always be at risk because, unlike the useless NPCs he typically associates with, she is the current head of their family and is about to take charge of the underground world of assassins and spies. Kyoichiro elaborates on how their lineage has been filled with supernatural beings over the centuries, except for one very ordinary family member that appears in each generation, who ultimately passes down the gene that produces the next generation of powerful assassins. With Matsumi being the current carrier and family head by default, Kyoichiro emphasizes that it is every family member's duty to ensure her survival at all costs. Just then, a group of underworld assassins launches a broad daylight attack to eliminate her, and Taiyo nearly loses control as the limo is showered with bullets, but Matsumi reassures him not to panic because their dog, Goliath, is an amazing driver. While Taiyo begins to pray like an exorcist who has just encountered the devil, Kyoichiro takes a moment from his tea to deal with the situation. After using his iron web skill to turn their foes into human barbecue, he jumps back inside and informs Taiyo that a serial bomber is targeting Matsumi before assigning him his first mission, which is to keep her alive for a full day. He then explains how the bomber likes to announce his plans on Twitter and hands Taiyo a gun, promising to reunite him with his family if anything happens to Matsumi. As Taiyo spends the rest of the day searching the entire school for anything suspicious, he starts to notice how much attention Matsumi pays to her surroundings and becomes even more committed to keeping her safe. However, just a few minutes after lunch, he temporarily forgets how to act like an antisocial weirdo and takes a piece of chocolate from his friends before reality hits him again. Moments later, he finds himself waking up in the student council office, where Matsumi explains that the infirmary was closed right before he notices a bomb attached to the roof. After it goes off, they manage to survive thanks to his quick thinking, but he soon realizes that the bomber must have been tracking her every move. When he sees the last bomb placed in his shirt, he decides to sacrifice himself to keep her safe, but just as he jumps out, Kyoichiro disables it and praises him for sticking to the mission. Once they return inside, the rest of the family arrives and reveals that they had been sneaking around campus to assist Taiyo since it's his first mission. Shinzo then captures the bomber, and Kyoichiro wraps him up with the bomb before launching him into the sky to create a firework display for everyone. After spending the night at Matsumi's family mansion, Taiyo goes to Futaba's room to thank her for her hospitality and to ask for training so he can truly protect Matsumi when the time comes. When she tells him to stop thinking he can ever reach their level, he insists he's ready for anything, so she shows him a glimpse of her powers by spinning him around like a rag doll. She then offers him a chance to experience their family's special training, but says he must live with them for a whole month first. He readily agrees to this since he's technically homeless, but after nearly getting impaled by a trap in the floor, she apologizes for not warning him that the entire mansion is a giant death trap that could send him straight to the cemetery if he doesn't get strong quickly. The next day, he attempts to snooze a bit longer by ignoring the alarm clock, but nearly turns into human-flavored bacon when it goes off. At breakfast, just moments later, he asks Matsumi how she has managed to live without powers, and they all explain that the mansion's computer system doesn't attack family members who are accepted. Suddenly, he starts whining about a stomachache, and when he finds out they add a little poison to every meal to help build tolerance, he rushes to the bathroom only to encounter a futuristic security system. After 3 weeks of struggling to survive, he begins to understand the Death Mansion, which shocks everyone since it took them at least a couple of months to adapt to the traps. One morning during breakfast, he asks Matsumi to pass the milk as usual, but after just one sip, the poison hits him, so he dashes to the bathroom while the others try to prevent Matsumi from feeling guilty about nearly ruining his insides. Just then, they hear Kengo calling out to him and discover him unconscious by the door, prompting Nanao to quickly take him to the lab to ensure he's alright. Once he wakes up and insists he's perfectly fine, Futaba tells him to stop pretending and pulls off the fake body he got from Kengo, saying she already knows he's been getting help from the others to make it look like he's been getting stronger on his own. She then shows her disappointment in Nanao for allowing him to do something so reckless, and when he tries to take the blame, she adds a concussion to the list of issues, and tells him he needs to take it easy before handing him a book from when she started her training. Just a few days later, he fully recovers thanks to Nanao's medical skills and even manages to solve the code in the bathroom, leading everyone to celebrate him before his ring suddenly starts glowing. When they see it, they explain that the mansion has accepted him as part of the family, so Futaba agrees to begin his assassin training since he has shown he is worthy. As the next week starts, while walking to class with Matsumi, Taiyo senses a baseball coming right for her head and catches it without looking, making the baseball coach think they might have finally found the answer to their long-standing failures. Hours later, they head up to the roof for lunch. However, he notices the strange look she's been giving him and asks if he did something wrong. She warns him to be cautious about how he uses his skills in public, explaining that all the girls have started calling him a Walmart ninja because of his stealthy movements. Later that afternoon at home, he joins her in the family office to tackle a mountain of paperwork. When he questions why she's the only one handling it, she reminds him that she is the head of the family, then notices that Kengo forgot to include a specific attachment for their weekly reports. Moments later, they reach his room and are almost knocked out by the overwhelming smell of his huge laundry pile, and he pops his head out from the top to ask what they need. Mutsumi then questions why he always acts like he forgets the report, and he responds by pulling out his lunch, telling her to handle it herself if it's so important. Taiyo quickly tries to locate the report himself so they can finish it, but then Kengo leaps out of the laundry pile with his magnum swinging around, claiming he doesn't deserve the stress of work. When she tells him to keep ranting while wearing pants, he reminds her that just a few years back, she used to play in the bath with him before she turned into a middle-aged Karen stuck in a villain's body. This really pushes Mutsumi to her limit, so she decides to teach him a lesson. But he quickly uses his cloning ability to trick Taiyo and dashes out of the room. However, Mutsumi opts to lock down the entire mansion to ensure he can't get away. Meanwhile, Shinzo has just begun a secret mission to infiltrate a counterfeit money operation. But after he secures the plate they use to print the fake bills, the alarms in the building start blaring. Back at the mansion, Mutsumi and Taiyo are starting to think about giving up since they've searched everywhere. But then they spot him hiding inside a painting. Taiyo immediately tries to catch him and ends up being too quick for Mutsumi. But after she catches up and realizes he escaped into a hidden vent, she gets frustrated and turns off the lockdown. She then decides to look for the report with Taiyo, but as soon as they enter his room, she slaps a cuff on his wrist and tells him to drop the disguise. When he asks what she means, she tells him to stop pretending because he definitely captured the real Taiyo and put on the disguise to make her lift the lockdown. After she points out that Taiyo would never enter a room before her, Kengo drops the disguise and admits that she isn't the slow-witted little sister he used to play with. Later that day, she serves Taiyo a tasty meal, and he thanks her for finally giving him some normal food before the crazy amount of cyanide in it catches up to him. Just then, he hears the phone ring and decides to pick it up, only to have his eardrums shattered by Shinzo's yelling. After Mutsumi switches to a video call, he pleads for help because he just ran out of ammo at the worst possible moment. She tells Taiyo that he's a cowardly man-child who doesn't have any guns and insists he needs to help out. A few minutes later, Taiyo enters the building. But as he searches for Shinzo, a guard notices him and starts interrogating him while pointing a gun at his head. Thanks to the weapons training Shinzo provided, Taiyo manages to disarm the guard and knocks him out, then takes down the other guards in that area. Once he locates Shinzo, the gun-obsessed weirdo is hugging a pistol. But then, all the goons in the facility arrive, so he gets back into action and takes them out like a crazed version of John Wick. However, while trying to escape outside, Taiyo gets shot in the thigh. After he collapses, the sniper threatens to blow his brains out if Shinzo doesn't give up. As soon as Shinzo drops his gun, Taiyo throws a fork at him, which he uses to wreck the sniper's rifle before taking him down. While he ends up carrying Taiyo home, a detective named Seiji discovers the facility and attempts to interrogate the only guard Shinzo left behind. But the guard won't say anything, so Seiji cracks his head open and decides to focus on Taiyo instead. A few nights later, he spots Taiyo on his way home and asks for a friendly chat at the precinct. Once they reach an interrogation room, he pulls out photos from Taiyo's recent activities and asks for information about the people he works with, claiming there's no way a slow-witted little guy like him could handle so many missions alone. When Taiyo insists he doesn't know what he's talking about, Seiji casually spikes a glass of water right in front of him and forces it down his throat. But for some reason, Taiyo was already prepared for that. After he gets rid of the water, Seiji tries to hit him with a hammer, so Taiyo jumps back and lands on a pile of bodies. As Seiji threatens to smash his skull, Taiyo still refuses to reveal anything about Mutsumi's family, saying he'd rather join his parents in heaven. Seiji decides to fulfill his wish. However, after he breaks through the wall, Kyoichiro appears and tells him to halt the test. Taiyo quickly asks for clarification, and Kyoichiro reveals that Seiji is the one who covers their tracks in return for their assistance in his twisted fantasy of being a crazed version of Batman. After stating that he didn't think Taiyo would last 2 seconds, Seiji attempts to ask Kyoichiro for help. But the creep who loves his sister claims he has an urgent mission and leaves. The next day in class, Taiyo feels an odd wave of tiredness wash over him just before Kyoichiro enters and announces he will be substituting for their first lesson. As soon as he begins teaching, Taiyo tries to catch some sleep and nearly gets his third eye opened by a supersonic piece of chalk, but manages to dodge it at the last second. Kyoichiro then uses Morse code to inform him that he must stay awake for the remainder of the class, even though it feels like his eyelids weigh a ton. After explaining that he needs to master the half-awakened state to ensure he can fight at any moment, Mutsumi joins their Morse code conversation and tells him to stop trying to turn Taiyo into a killing machine. Suddenly, he releases a special gas that puts everyone to sleep. Fortunately, Mutsumi had her gas mask handy, so she stays awake and continues to try to stop Kyoichiro. When Kyoichiro sees Taiyo's head drooping, he attempts to attack him with one of the chalks again, but Taiyo activates the half-awakened state to defend himself. Kyoichiro then spends the rest of the day training him to master this state. However, later that night, Taiyo ends up frightening Shinzo with his wild sleepwalking. A few nights later, Shion finishes a 3-day gaming binge and tries to catch up on some much-needed sleep. But a creepy hacker suddenly breaches her firewall, prompting her to get back up to ensure she doesn't expose any sensitive information. In just seconds, she accesses the hacker's system and attempts to shut everything down, but the hacker narrowly escapes with a bunch of Taiyo's photos. The next morning, she drags herself out of her room to inform Taiyo and Mutsumi about the incident, but after assuring them there's nothing else to worry about, she starts to wonder how the hacker managed to get in since only family members have the access key to bypass the firewall. Moments later, while walking to school, Taiyo narrowly avoids a sudden attack and spots the creepy hacker following them, so he bolts with Mutsumi and hides in an alley to set a trap for her. However, she surprises him by launching an attack from the roof, declaring her love for him and asking if he would kindly stay still so she can rip his heart out. Just then, Mutsumi recognizes Ayaka and informs Taiyo that she is a notorious assassin who targets guys she finds attractive, using needles to express her twisted affection. When he questions why she would want him, she insists it was love at first sight when she first saw a video of him on the dark web. In the next moment, she takes down another assassin who was after him and shows him a bounty that has gone public, stating that she needs to poke holes in him before anyone else does. After he calmly declines her offer, saying he needs to stay alive for Mutsumi, Ayaka tells her to thank Kyoichiro because, although he was the one who gave her the passkey to steal files on Taiyo, he made her promise not to harm his precious sister. She then shows off a small fraction of her abilities and promises to be back before running off. The very next day, she joins his class as a new student and immediately resumes Operation Murk My Crush. However, despite spending the rest of the week trying to ambush him, he easily evades all her attacks and starts acting like she doesn't even exist at a certain point. That all ends one afternoon in class when she suddenly decides to turn everyone into mindless zombies. After they all pin Taiyo down, Mutsumi tries to defend him, but then the assassin from the alley shows up to get his revenge. The next moment, Mutsumi shoves her away and almost takes a bullet to the head before Taiyo uses his stun gun to knock out the assassin. Ayaka then asks why she would save her and Mutsumi claims it is because she is happy someone else can see how amazing Taiyo is. This causes Ayaka to instantly become obsessed and leads to Taiyo becoming the third wheel during their walk home. Days later, Nanao calls Taiyo in the middle of his workout to tell him about his current mission to neutralize a top-secret bioweapon capable of ending all life in a small city. When Taiyo asks if he plans to take out the scientists working in the lab, Nanao explains that his mission is just to make sure the poison bomb never sees the light of day. He then proceeds to swallow it and tells Taiyo to come get him out of the lab, because his body shuts down whenever he activates his poison-destroying abilities. A couple minutes after he loses consciousness, Taiyo finds the lab but gets suspicious when he sees that most of the guards have already been knocked out. The next moment, he sees two assassins named Sui and Oga and immediately prepares himself for fight. However, Sui explains that they are elite government spies sent to destroy the lab, and Oga immediately starts glazing, because Taiyo has apparently become a celebrity in the underworld. After he decides to help them take down everyone else in the lab, they finally find Nano. But when Taiyo runs over to check on him, Oga attacks and tells him to stay back because they have to murk Nanao to make sure the poison never gets out. The moment Taiyo steps in front of his body to fight them off, Sui unleashes a supersonic skill that destroys his gun and leaves him paralyzed with countless cuts across his entire body. He then promises to make Nanao's final moments painless, but he wakes up at the last moment and promises Sui that the poison has been neutralized. After he shows him a poison patch to prove it, Sui decides to spare him and hands over a special ointment for Taiyo's wounds before saying that it would be pointless to save such a pathetic weakling. At the mansion the following day, Kyokiro decides to slow-cook Taiyo for bringing shame to the family, but Nanao and Mutsumi show up just in time to save him. When he tells them to stop and says he actually deserves to be punished for having a negative effect on the reputation they have built in the underworld, Kyokiro tells him to stop thinking a talentless, nobody can make people stop fearing him. He then offers to spare him if he manages to redeem himself by becoming better than Sui. On a train days later, Sui notices him and claims he could sense the lack of aura a mile away. After Taiyo admits to being a weakling and says that he plans to tail him until he learns enough to get stronger, Sui tells him to give up because he will never be able to keep up with him. As soon as they get to the stop, he activates his light speed skill to move without detection. But Taiyo quickly figures out a way to keep up, so Sui shreds off his clothes to keep him occupied. Despite that, Taiyo spends the following weeks tailing him and Oga on every mission and refuses to give up despite getting his nuts exposed more times than he can count. Days later, he finally manages to make it to the end of an entire day with his clothes still intact. But then Sui decides that it's time to end their freaky game of tag. After promising to make it quick, he charges in. But Taiyo surprisingly stops him in the middle of the attack because the countless strip-downs helped him master the flow of Sui's slices. He then yeets the fun-sized shredder to the other side of the cemetery, causing Sui to accept that he actually has potential. As Oga starts cleaning up his wounds and commends him, Sui decides to stop treating him like a complete waste of existence.